Today I'd like to talk about practicing mindfulness versus practicing non-aggression. Normally when we think about meditation or mindfulness, it's fair enough to say that what we think about is sitting down in a kind of a meditation area for a certain amount of time and then getting up and getting on with the rest of our life. I'd probably say fair enough to say that. And obviously that's kind of limited, and you'd kind of wonder how much this really does count as meditation, because there is this danger, a big danger, that we will be just kind of doing that to tick a box. So it's a kind of procedure. We do the thing, we do the meditation thing, and we do the mindfulness thing, and that's good, and then we move on, safe in the knowledge that we've done our bit for today, or we're keeping up our practice, or whatever it is. Not to say that there's necessarily anything harmful about that, but at the same time, I remember being at a talk that was given by a visiting monk from Sannyling in the University of Galway. So he was making kind of this point, and he was saying that it's a bit like going on the diet for 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever every day in the morning maybe, and then running off and pigging out on everything, because it's like we feel that we've done our virtuous thing. So there's no connection really between what we do in that sitting down on the meditation stool and their actual life. It's kind of like going to mass and then carrying on being the gobshite that you always are, regardless, because you've done the thing. You've put your suit on and you've been showing your face at mass. So that's it. That's kind of pretty much what your practice comes down to, your practice of religion or practice of spirituality in the case of doing your meditation slot. And as I say, that's not necessarily to say that's always going to be the case. It's just that there's a tendency for it to be the case, because what we're doing is using mindfulness as a way to augment our life or improve it, or an accessory even. So we're accessorizing our life with our spiritual practices. And the thing about that is that it's a backwards way of doing it, because no matter how much we try and improve our life or accessorize it or spiritualize it, that's looking at things 100% the wrong way. We're indulging in a kind of fantasy, and indulging in fantasies doesn't really bear fruit of any kind. Well, it does, but it doesn't bear any good fruit. It bears bitter fruit or sour fruit, not juicy, sweet fruit. So the reason that's backwards is because it's not about being more spiritual or ticking a box so that we can say we're actually dedicating some of our life to something better than just surviving or playing the game or taking part in the rat race, whatever you might want to call it. We're actually, there's more to us than that. So we're trying to create this impression for ourselves. But what is the helpful thing to do, and the way that really would be meaningful would be to bring mindfulness to our life exactly as it is, without any aim of improving it or becoming more spiritual, because that's just an ego-based fantasy, an intoxicating one maybe, a seductive one, but a fantasy nonetheless. And it's easy because it's fun, because you can imagine all these nice things. Whereas if we become aware of our life as it actually is, that's a lot harder work, because there's no pleasant fantasies of ourselves as being more spiritual beings and having all this wonderful compassion and feelings of oneness and empathy and insightful stuff. Which really, when we look at what people talk about, people do love to burble on about this kind of stuff, on and on and on. And when they do, it makes you think, well, hang on. This is all ego-based fantasy. Where's the real stuff? Where's the nitty-gritty stuff? Where's the stuff about actually having to encounter yourself as you actually are? And as you actually are, being profoundly non-spiritual. Because if I wasn't profoundly non-spiritual, I wouldn't need to do any meditation or anything else. Why the hell would I need to, if I was a totally spiritual being? I wouldn't bother doing any of that stuff. I wouldn't. I'd just float around, go around the place, being spiritual. No need for any exercises or going to some kind of spiritual gym or working out or anything like that. So although formal meditation practice can be a helpful thing, what's more helpful is to take an interest in our unspiritual life, our non-mindful life as it actually is, because we prefer to ignore that. And as a matter of fact, we do ignore it. We ignore it automatically. It's our shadow. We ignore the shadow, and that's how the shadow gets to be the shadow. If we bring the light of awareness to the shadow, that's a different matter entirely. So that's what you could call psychological work or conscious work. And it's not glamorous. And it's got nothing to do with seeing angels or angelic beings and stuff like that. It's actually very challenging. So coming back to this idea of working with our aggression or practicing non-aggression, what we can say is that this kind of quality that we all have, this kind of, either to a lesser or greater degree, and there's a quality of being aggressive, and we apply it to all situations. So whatever comes up that we're unhappy about, our innate aggressiveness will show itself then, like a small dog barking or yapping. And we could also think of this as being the essence of mechanicalness. So we all have an essence of mechanicalness in us, which may be invisible, and we may be able to feel that we're non-mechanical for a lot of the time if the situation isn't demanding. But when the situation is demanding or challenging, then the mechanicalness comes out like a small barking dog. And what this means is that we have no patience for the difficult situation. We just want to conclude it. we want to resolve it quickly. We've got zero patience. So we either want to fix it really quickly, or if we can't do that, we despair. We become very, very down on ourselves. I think this is terrible. So we write ourselves off for not being able to fix it. So there's no psychological work there at all. There's just this mechanical reflex. And the mechanical reflex is really me trying to change the situation convulsively or compulsively. Push it away. And it's not, there's no subtlety to this at all. I'm just trying to get rid of the situation. I'm just trying to make it right. And so that's a reflex. It's a reaction. And so as long as things are going well, as I've just said, we may not be aware of our degree of reactivity. But when the pressure is on a bit, that's when we discover how mechanical we are, how reactive we are, or how much aggression is in us. So aggression in this sense of the word, which is how a word Jung Trungpa uses a lot, is this need to have things to be the way we want them to be, this need to change things in accordance with our thinking so that they can accord with our thinking. So really it's a form of slavery to our thinking, to our preferences. So in this case, non-aggression would be freedom from that state of slavery, or it would be the no longer being in that state of slavery. We automatically construct freedom, or the answer to our problems, in terms of being able to react successfully or aggress successfully and get the thing to happen that we want to happen, or stop the thing from happening that we don't want to happen. And then we think that'll be super good, and then everything will be fine. But that isn't at all the case, because all we've done is feed that aggressive part of us so it gets stronger the next time. So we become more aggressive. The habit of aggression, or the addiction to controlling, has become stronger. So there's no freedom there, there's just increased extra slavery, imprisonment, with no hope of early release. So where the freedom lies is not in being able to be successful in our controlling, and thus becoming what we see as being a winner. But the freedom comes in us not being able to succeed in that way. So you could say the freedom comes in our failure, even though failure is a kind of a dumb word, really. Both success and failure are dumb words, because they only ever talk about our ability or lack of ability to get the world to accord with our thinking or our preferences. And our thinking can be as stupid as anything. It never gets examined. But we judge ourselves and our ability to act out that thinking, which is pretty absurd. So I might have the stupidest, dumbest thinking ever. Preposterously dumb and stupid thinking. And yet have a good ability to get things to accord with that thinking, i.e. a good ability to control. And then we see that as a good thing. And ultimately all thinking is dumb, especially when it comes to strict. It's not always dumb, I suppose. Thinking is appropriate and accurate in certain instances, but when it comes to the psychological sphere, there is absolutely no question that thinking is dumb. And thinking is always dumb in the psychological sphere, because it's always assuming it knows what things should be or how things should be. It's always trying to impose its map, its theory or belief on things. And the one thing that is always totally true is that thought's theory or map or belief is always 100% erroneous when it comes to the psychological sphere, or when it comes to the psyche. It's always, always, always wrong. It has to be wrong, because it's a dead, static thing. It's a set of categories, and who we are is not something that can be captured within a set of categories. So who we are is not a fixed, defined kind of a thing. Who we are, or what we are in our essence, is a process. And it's a process, as Jung says, it's a process that moves from an unknown origin to an unknown destination. And of course, there's something rather amazing about such a process. It's awe-inspiring. We don't have to know any more than the fact that it is a movement from an unknown origin to an unknown destination to realize that it is an awe-inspiring process. And the processes that are presided over by the thinking mind are not awe-inspiring because they're a movement from what I already know, a known origin, to a known destination. It's towards a goal. Goals are always what I know, so it's always heading towards my mind because goals are the mind. So this type of movement is the movement of me trying to accord with my thinking. Which is not really a process at all because it doesn't go anywhere. It only just reaffirms the thinking, which mustn't be questioned but only acted upon. So what is valuable in terms of psychology, in the psychological sphere, is not our ability to get things to be the way we want them to be, but rather our ability to notice this automatic tendency to want to get things to be this particular way. So in other words, what is helpful and will actually free us is to see ourselves being aggressive. Now, as long as we automatically focus on the goal or winning or losing, we're never going to see our aggression. That's invisible to us. And our aggression in that case, we relate to it as our will. So I'll say it's what I want. I want to do this. Which means that of course I'm never going to question it. If it's what I want, it's my actual will, my actual volition, rather than a mechanical reflex that hypnotizes me. So if I can see my aggression and observe it, a big turnaround has happened. Because I can now realize that it isn't my will, it isn't my volition. By actually observing my aggression and noticing it, I realize that it is not me, it's not my will at all. It's actually the antithesis of my will. So it's a mechanical force that hijacks my volition, or hijacks my will and takes me over. And not only does it hijack my will, it causes me to identify with my thinking, or identify with my idea of myself. And as soon as I do that, I have lost all consciousness. So that identification with my idea of myself is when I have no ability at all to pay attention to anything. There is no attention in the true sense of the word at all then. As Jung says, where there is conflict, there is consciousness. But if I just go along with my impulses and my thinking the whole time, there's no conflict. There's no awareness that I'm being hijacked. And there's no consciousness. And so my life just goes wherever the mechanical process will take it. And if I want to know where the mechanical process will take me, that's not hard to explain. It will take us, it'll take me, it'll take us into a state of great suffering. Because that's what it always does. It cannot not do that. It's all preordained. The mechanical process always leads to a place of suffering. And the journey there, we might be thinking we're getting somewhere great, and we might be celebrating and thinking this is amazing. But that's kind of like an addiction. When you start off being addicted to some drug, or maybe something else, it feels great and we feel that we're in charge and we're having a great time. So that's the well-known honeymoon phase. So there is a honeymoon phase to identifying with the idea that we have of ourselves and losing consciousness. And it's a very seductive honeymoon phase. We really do think we're having a great time. But that's just that's just the sugar coating on the pill, and the pill is actually poisonous. The sweetness conceals something which is very bitter indeed. So the practice of non-aggression isn't a thing that we just allocate a certain amount of time to. What we're really doing is paying attention to our lives as our lives are. And there's no thing happening that isn't our lives. So it's everything really. So in that case, my life is my mindfulness practice. And I don't have to try and make it accord with certain ideas about what it should be. Because straight away, as soon as I do that, that's not practicing non-aggression, that is practicing aggression. So whatever way my life is happening to me, to be aware of when aggression arises in me during the course of my everyday life is the practice. And needless to say, there'll be lots of times when I'll forget what the practice is, or forget to observe the aggression and identify with the aggression instead. But that's part of it too. So that forgetting what practicing non-aggression means is part of the practice. So it's exactly the same as when we're doing formal meditation and watching the breathing, and our attention gets distracted or taken away by some thought, and I've gone away somewhere then. And so noticing that happen, when I do notice that it has happened, is also part of being present. So being present is noticing that I'm absent, and there's no forcing involved, because the becoming absent just happens automatically. And the being aware, however long that takes. It might take a second or a microsecond, or it might take hours. Being aware that I've become absent is the practice. And obviously there's something curious about this, because I can't force myself to notice that I'm absent. Being aware of when I'm absent is not a form of aggression or spiritual aggression, as we might call it. It happens all by itself. There's no way that my own wishes or desire to be more present in that way can actually cause me to be present, because that means I'm more interested in being present than I am interested in how I am normally, which is absent. So I like all the good stuff and I don't like the crappy stuff. So that's my preference. I don't like looking at the mucky stuff. And yet it's in the mucky stuff, in the manure pile, that the freedom exists. So the practice is noticing when we're aggressive, not trying to stop ourselves being aggressive. And the actual noticing itself is a gentle, delicate thing. Noticing or seeing that we're aggressive. It's not at all aggressive. It's not trying to change anything. It's just being interested. Okay, thanks for watching.